Welcome to another episode of the Strong Family Project podcast. I am Joe.
Joined by me, Mel. I'm used to you saying that.
I know, I'm changing it up on you. See what happens.
Okay. Welcome back to the Strong Family Project podcast, where we guide you on the path to raising confident, independent, and resilient children in a strong family environment.
Today we're talking about the critical importance of meeting every 90 days with your spouse and getting on the right track. Now, you could sit down every 90 days and get yourself on the right track.
Right.
I would include the kids to the point where you've done this independently first. And Mel and I were feeling a lot of family pressure, and it felt like everything was overwhelming. And so what we needed to do was check when we did our last 90-day meeting. Oops, it was longer than 90 days. Go figure. We didn't have our grounding meeting, and things fell off track. As humans, we tend to lose momentum roughly every 90 days. We have enough motivation that can carry us through that period of time. This is why businesses do like fiscal quarters. As our companies, we always sit down and set our 90-day rocks, which is a term from a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. But we go through the process to stop, look around, assess where we just went, assess where we want to go, decide on what are the key things that we need to get done. And we put our heads down and we push forward for another 90 days. Then we pop up and we look around to see how far we went. And we put our heads down. The big mistake is, number one, you put your heads down, you never stop and look around, or you're always just popping around, looking around. Oh, what did I do today? What did I do this week? You didn't work long enough and hard enough to see any results. So if you're always looking around, it's like doing one workout and flexing the mirror and be like, did I do it?
The indicator for me was like, I've talked about how I like having visuals. So I have a to-do list, I type it up, and sometimes I spend more time on writing the to-do list than actually doing anything on it. And then once I have it printed and like in front of me, sometimes I have no idea like what is most important. I'm just floundering, and that's where we were at before we had our meeting. And now, once we've done it, which we're going to talk about it, I feel so focused and know exactly what I need to do.
Yeah, let's talk about exactly what it is. The process isn't that complicated, but setting it up in an uninterrupted environment is critical. I turned my phone completely off. I took a day off of work. We sat on the front porch with no distractions, and then we started this process, understanding that it could take 1 hour, it could take 8 hours. It didn't matter. We were going to sit down and do. I think ours ended up being between 3 and 4 hours. And I'm going to share the process with you today and some of the things that I'll be working on during this upcoming 90 days that we decided out of the process. You ready to go, Mel? All right, here we go. The first thing you do is a positive focus. What went right in the last 90 days? And you share all the wins. For us, it was things like Logan's football season. He didn't want to play. He did play. He loved playing. Ev getting his training wheels off. All of our kids have been very different with how they've learned to ride a bike. Logan was the standard way, had some training wheels, eventually got them off. With Henry, we did the balance bike, and he went from balance bike to pedaling a regular bike in 1 day. Mm-hmm. And he mastered the balance bike, hopped on other ones, started pedaling. I didn't have to push him even one single time. Everett did the balance bike, hopped on the regular bike, didn't get the pedals, latched onto the arm, was impossible to push. It was like going to blow up my shoulder because he's a thick kid. And trying to get him moving, and it was hard. And so we're like, all right, I guess we'll go back to these training wheels things, even though we've heard that balance bikes have been better. It worked great for one, but did not work great for the next one. So we put him on, and we just let him build up confidence, walking to the corner back and forth day after day, month after month, till one day we noticed the training wheels didn't hit the ground. I said, hey, maybe you want to take those off soon. He said, no. And then the next day, he said, okay, let's try it without. So I planted the seed. I didn't force him. We took him off. I've never seen him fall off his bike. He's got it now. And so that happened in the last 90 days. It was a huge win. Had some crucial conversations I needed to in the workplace across a few different jobs and companies that I have. The food in the house has been great in the last 90 days. Mel has done a wonderful job simplifying our prepared meals that we use. And I used to be someone who's obsessed with like, all right, I gotta eat healthy during the week. I got to make it to a cheat day. I haven't had a cheat day in months. I haven't had a dessert since the start of this quarter, if at all. And a lot of that has to do with we got our house in order, literally, when it comes to food. What are some of the food items you enjoy, Mel?
Kombucha, which is what I'm drinking right now. Lots of sourdough stuff, waffles.
Protein waffles for the kids.
Even like making hard-boiled eggs lately. That's been super helpful.
Yep. I've been on the veggie game. Got a lot of frozen veggies in the air fryer. Stepped my game up there.
I know I walked in the house today and it smelled like vegetables, which isn't really a compliment, but I'm glad you're eating them.
My body tells me when I'm feeling exhausted and run down for like 2 weeks a year, just, hey, eat more vegetables. And I eat more vegetables for did I say 2 weeks? 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe. And then I feel better, and then I'll just have my superfood and very sporadic vegetables after that. And then my body will be like, hey, you forgot those vegetables again. And so that's been on track. The pre-making the oatmeal is crucial for us. P.S. We're out of oatmeal.
That's a Monday issue.
Yeah. And you'll know why in a second, why she's saying that. Transition to school. I have school going from pre-K to kindergarten to a full day, full schedule. It's gone smooth. The other kids moving up grades. You talk about all the wins and build up positive momentum. This is called the bright spots principle. Find things that are going well and try to amplify them versus trying to start a totally new project from scratch. It was an excellent research in Chip and Dan Heath's book. I'm going to say Switch is the name of that one. They have some good ones. And it was on that people would go to impoverished countries that had malnourishment issues and teach them how to make healthy food. Unfortunately, it was the healthy food from that country where the people were coming from. And so it didn't really stick in the cultures. So what they did instead is they looked all around to try to find someone that was doing well within that culture, a bright spot, and then use that person to teach his or her methods to the rest of that culture, tribe, or area. And they found out that if they found something that was already working and amplified it, it was way more sticky than if they just imposed something completely new from somewhere else.
That's great. I love that. And I, excuse me, I think that sometimes when I started writing my list for like the good things that were going on, at first it was like hard to think of them because I think lately we've been so focused, so lacking focus and not knowing what to do with stuff. So I think it was hard for me to come up with the good stuff. But once we did and we shared like back and forth, it gave us this great foundation to jump off of again for the next 90 days.
That's a great point. It's part of the popping your head up and looking around. You also have to turn around and look to where you just came from, and then you can decide where to go. So the next part, the meat and potatoes, we took about 15 minutes quietly, and we did a brain dump on everything that we thought needs to get done in the next 90 days. Just open-ended question like what do you want to get done? What's important for the next 90 days? Hammer it all out. It took 15 minutes. We shared back and forth things that were similar. We made a little mark by, and I got together a master list of everything that she had, everything that I had. And so we talked it all through and was like, wow, this list is quite big. And so we used a couple strategies for this. The next question, and good questions always frame a good discussion, is if we were going to only do these few things on the list in the next 90 days, what are they in that at the end of the 90 days, we'll look back and be like, wow, that was an awesome 90 days. And those are the big picture items that'll take 90 days to implement. And so we would put a little star next to those. And then we got ourselves a couple lists. Family rocks, which are the big family things to do over the course of 90 days. Individual things that we need to get done as a person. And then to-dos. This list is important. To-do is something that you can get to done in under a week. You don't want to spend a quarter on doing something that'll take you one day. And so to-dos don't go on your big list, but they do get identified and called out, and they go on a separate list that you can just knock out. And a lot of this stuff, we identify why we put it on the list. We discussed possible solutions, and many of them we would solve right then in the meeting and then cross it out.
Like, for example, can we give examples now?
Yes.
So we were struggling to find time to record podcasts amongst also working and all that. We were doing it on Saturdays, and I mentioned this because it was bothering me that it was taking away from time with family on the weekend. So we solved this problem. We now have 2 other set times during the week that we can choose from to be able to record and keep this consistent for you, because we love to provide you value. But that was a problem that we weren't discussing, and we solved it right then and there. It didn't take very long. We just had to be good at identifying what the problem was.
Yep, exactly. And so the person that put it on the list owned identifying it and would say, hey, what do you mean by that? And let the person fully explain to make sure you're both on the same page. That one we talked about, we solved, got to cross it off. We continued down our list. One of mine was reduce phone usage by 50%. That's not a rock for me. That's not something that takes 90 days. I looked at my phone usage. It's not even an app. I think most phones just have it nowadays. I think there are apps for it, but I think most phones have it. I added it up, what it was during a week, cut it in half, set a goal so my phone will then notify me when I hit that halfway goal. Doesn't take a whole quarter. It'll take me adhering to that, but it was all set up. That was the decision. Don't want to cut it to 0 because it's on right now recording the podcast. That's why I kind of glance on YouTube to the arm of our seat, because that's where the cell phone manages all the cameras and all that stuff. I also love podcasts and audiobooks, but I can cut down at least half of the other stuff, and I can batch my time even on the items that I like. So that was just, hey, I want to discuss this. This is not helping me go where I want to go, so I'm going to fix it right now. Fix it.
And really, just as like a side note, having these meetings does bring you closer to your spouse or partner, because, like, for example, that phone usage thing, that's like a you thing. You want to do that for you. But discussing it with me, I might give him some feedback. I now know that's an issue for him. So I could be more aware and support you in that. So I think this is just a great opportunity to also improve communication between the adults in the family. Should I go to my food one? Because we had mentioned it earlier.
I believe that's a rock, right?
Are we just talking 2 dudes right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Getting antsy, but we are close. So that cuts your list down. And the power of cutting the list down with just deciding some of these things is it creates forward momentum. You see the items get crossed out. You see you solving things. You see yourself moving forward in the course of 30 to 60 minutes on things that would have normally boiled under the surface for weeks on weeks. And so you can cross all that stuff off.
So because for me, you've done this in companies, so it makes a lot more sense to you than it does to me. So I just want to review. The to-do is something that can happen within a week or so. Like, it's a quicker thing that you can cross off the list. It doesn't require the full 90 days, but it needs to get done.
Correct.
Okay.
So you have a bunch of them solved, and then a bunch of them you're not quite sure on. They are big picture things. They might need some more discussing, and then we play a game called Kill, Keep, or Combine. This is the same thing we teach you in the Core Values episode 1 and the free download at strongfamilyproject.com, which is our steps of the path. You have free PDF where it teaches you how to do your core values. This is the same process. You list all your core values and you do kill, keep, or combine to end up with the ones that you want going forward. So how it works are things that you cannot get done in the next 90 days. You kill it. You cross it off. You can kick it to next quarter. You can put it on a different list to save for later. But you're identifying this isn't important this second. And we had a few of those. I think we had about 2 of those. Mm-hmm. Where we wanted to get something done and it just didn't fit our human capacity. And so it had to get bumped and we had to kill it off now's list and move it to later's list. But we discussed it and we solved it, and now we're not thinking about it all the time. So we can do the important stuff. Combine are things that are similar. There's a couple around walks. Mel wanted to hike this one canyon in our area more. I want to get back to daily walks, and we had to discuss that and come up with a solution for that. And that one ended up being a to-do, which is we talked about, all right, every once a week we'll go here. That's not practical. What about every other week? Now it's getting complicated. And we said, all right, this quarter we're going to do 3 hikes elsewhere. And we just left it that vague. It could be this canyon. It could be out in a different town. But in the next 90 days, once a month, we're going to go somewhere different and hike together and explore together. And so that was what was practical. We moved that to a to-do, which is just schedule those hikes.
And it's good to be practical, because I was feeling overwhelmed, especially with like holidays coming up. We have a family wedding coming up. I want to set goals that are achievable. So that was important to not overshoot the goal and then we just don't even get it. So that one took some discussing.
And yep, that's the combine and the keep are ones that you want to do. And so we worked through Kill, Keep, or Combine. We kicked some more things to the to-do list. We kicked some things to the next quarter, as in like, all right, we got to do this, but we don't have to do it right now. And then we came up with our rocks. Now, we don't put our rocks necessarily, our family rocks, under a person, but we discuss them like this is critical. We write it down and we wordsmith it a little bit. So it's like a SMART goal. If you don't know what SMART goals are, you can do it. We don't have enough time on this podcast to go into it all. Just look up how to set a SMART goals. I'll give you a quick example. Like a bad goal would be walk more. It's way too vague. What does more mean? Does it mean what I think more is? Does it mean what Mel thinks more is? Because I think more, I'm probably doing, I don't know, 80 miles a week. So let's do 150 miles. Is that your definition of more? Is that too much? A better one would be 3 hikes or 1 hike per month. Like that's a very specific where you can look at it at the end of the quarter and say, yes, it was done clearly, or no, it was not done clearly. There is no ambiguity. And so we write out the rocks for the family. Some of them get kicked to personal rocks, like things that I have to do. I have 2 business ones that are related to me and I control those rocks. So we have to write those out, but we have to identify them because it does take time and capacity. And the one for this was develop Q1 content plan for the Strong Family Project. So instead of sitting down and talking about just questions that we hear from listeners and viewers and talking about things in our life, we want to come out, here's where we're going to go in 90 days so we have a more coherent education plan to help people more. And I need to sit down and create all that this quarter, which is the last quarter of 2023, so that we could implement it and get the help we need in the first quarter of 2024. And we sat down, we did a lot of organization around this project. We bring in a social media person. She's going to be excellent. I've worked with her before, great personality. She's already going to help us out on Instagram. She's going to help us out with the consistency of the emails to make sure 2 of them get out every week. She's going to help out with the YouTube thumbnails and things like that, which I don't have the capacity to do. And she's very talented at it. So we start to identify where we need help with things that we're doing. And for us, it's this project.
And one person does take the lead on the rock, but then the other person might have to contribute to it. There's a couple of your business ones that I have to be a piece of it, but I'm not the one who's the lead for making sure that rock happens.
Great point. Responsibility happens in 100%. One person's name gets on that rock to then say if it was done or not done. They can get tons of support. They don't have to be the only one doing the work, but they need to drive the process to get that one thing done. And I keep saying the term rock. I should pause for just a second. This is an older term. I don't know if it was a Jim Collins or a Stephen Covey perhaps term, where if you're going to put in like rocks and pebbles and water into a jar, you got to put the big rocks in first, and then you put in all the small stuff, the pebbles and the sand and the water, so it can fit around those big items. So the big items go in first, otherwise it won't fit. You put the sand in and the pebbles in, and you try to put the big ones in, they'll just pour over the top. And that was his analogy to say, first things first, make sure you are doing the major tasks first, and then everything else can fit around it. And that's why they're called rocks.
So one of my personal rocks is around food, which I alluded to earlier. So I happen to notice that, yes, we have all these cool foods that we make at home, but I was getting very stressed out about being consistent with them because we'd run out of something midweek, and then I would stress for a couple of days about when I'm going to be able to do that, re-bake that thing or whatever the case may be. So it's really important for me to get that under control. And we discussed it, and Joe had a great suggestion where I choose one day a week. That becomes my day to handle all of the food, like making whatever we're lacking, and then pick like a backup day just in case it doesn't work. And the most important thing you said to me, though, was, and then when it's not that day, you don't even think about it. Because I'm noticing personally, I spend so much time just stressing and thinking about this thing that I need to do, and I might not have time to do it. I spend so much time thinking about that it detracts from me being able to accomplish other things. So today you mentioned that we're like out of sourdough nuns. I was like, oh, I'm not thinking about it till Monday. And that just frees me up. And yes, there's going to be a couple of days where you might have to eat something different. But otherwise, I would be stressing about it, and it would just take away from my ability to do other things.
I did say out of oatmeal, but we're also out of sourdough naans. Thank you for bringing that up.
I know, that's right. You did say oatmeal, but I noticed the naan thing was empty. Okay. Monday will be busy.
So it does provide vocabulary around it, and it does provide people to be more understanding and flexible. Because like I now know with the day for all this stuff, like the kids might finish something and they can add it to a list for Monday. They don't have to bring it up all the time, and then Mel might not be in the right mood. I don't have time right now. But then there's kind of this awkwardness. We provide a universal language on here's when it gets done and here's what to expect. Clarity of expectations, and now less drama about it.
Yeah, and it does teach flexibility too. So I think I already feel so much lighter because of that. Another one of my rocks, and I've noticed recently with the kids doing sports, they're not being very consistent with reading at home. And our kindergartner, the teacher is wonderfully sending home practice for writing, practicing his name, reading these sight word books. And I was like, oh my gosh, he has homework and I'm not doing great with holding him accountable to doing these things. One of my rocks is to create a daily habits checklist for the kids. And at first I thought, well, that's probably just a to-do because I'll just make the list. But truly, it is a 90-day rock because the list I make might suck and it might not work. And we'll try it out for a week and it's not working. I might have to make adjustments. So I wanted to create that into a quarterly rock for this quarter because I think it will take some trial and error, getting the kids on board, getting their buy-in, discussing it at the family meeting. So that's one of my personal rocks to get that going because I think that's super critical right now as we're already a few months into the school year.
Right, and took some good conversation around, is creating the list what we want done? No, we want to create the list and them to follow it, and that becomes a rock. We use what's called LMA. Mel's got to create the list. That's just one step. Now lead, manage, and hold accountable. Get this in their system, do the check-ins, make it part of their common vocabulary, build it into habits. That takes longer. So don't cut these things short. I would rather have you put down fewer things and do them better than a list that you'll never get to. Somewhere between 3 and 7 each is ideal, depending on your capacity. Like right now, I'm really busy. Like I have, 3 full-time jobs, do this project, got kids, like things are really busy. And so I need to protect my focus, and I don't expect other people to understand that as well. And so sometimes that bumps up with Mel and I, where something will come up that she wants to tell me, and she'll just, whatever I'm doing, she would throw it in because she didn't have a time around when she could tell me. So we had to get clarity. All right, write down a list so it's not your burden. But if there is something that's going to take my focus, it's got to be discussed when I sit down to lunch. That's the only time I can do it. I cannot switch tasks that many times and then solve this major problem and then try to go back with the burden and stress of solving that problem to then bounce back to doing something else I was doing. I just can't do it. And so we had to create a time, which we decided on, where she could basically bring these things. We can either solve them or do what we have to, but then it would be my undivided attention because I didn't define when I could handle those things for her.
And that again, just like I said earlier, with feeling like the load taken off my shoulders, this was a big one for me that I didn't even bring it up. You brought it up. I think you called it like Joe's focus time or something, because we're both home and this was an issue for us where I would just walk in and say, hey, I have a question, but he could be in the middle of something. So it certainly helped us to communicate that. So I appreciate that you told me that was an issue. And I always would feel terrible to interrupt you, but now I know when I can. And we did have to figure out the time because at first we're like, oh, morning, or what about the evening? I'm like, well, in the evening, we're all just done. In the morning, I don't want to start my day by giving you a list of problems. Anyway, you suggested the lunchtime, and I'm just excited that we have a solution to that. And I didn't even necessarily know it was a problem. A part of this process really helped us identify where the problems were. I'm grateful for that.
I'll share one more personal rock that landed on my list other than the family rocks, which was guide Logan's workouts. And so similar to Mel's getting them on the homework bandwagon and getting their to-dos done, I need to lead, manage, and hold accountable. This is Logan's first off-season from football. He has shown interest in it. I can't blow off this opportunity to connect with him and build a lifelong habit. So 3 times per week, I need to guide his workout program. And so that requires shifting a lot of things around. It requires me to be available around his schedule a lot of the times. It requires me to write and program and do a lot more things. So that is one of my personal rocks, but we do think it's important because this is his first time. This is a critical moment to build a habit. And if it doesn't happen now, he can just say, I guess it wasn't that important. And that could really frame his life unless I take this seriously.
And I'll share one of my last ones, and we combined several things into this one. I had written down like Christmas, and then I had written down, because we've talked a lot about doing holidays differently, redefining what treat means, and all these different things. And I want to make sure we are following through and actually living it out. And we also had on my list something about setting up these timelines where the kids see what they've accomplished this year, because things tend to just fade into the background. And we did a whole episode about adorning your home in your values and what you're about and what you've accomplished. So that became one of my personal rocks, where sometime in the 90 days and pre-Christmas, really, we want to present them with either a collage of the rites of passage that they did, set up this timeline where they can look on the wall and see that they accomplished X, Y, or Z this year, and just keep that flowing as time goes on. And that was really important, because that's one of those things that's been on the list. But it's more important that I work on my accounting. It's more important that I balance the checkbook. But this really, given that our focus really wants to be back on who we're about, not what we're not about, that was an important one. So I'm excited to get creative with figuring out how to display that.
Agreed.
Yay.
Now, this process is incredibly worth it. Now, next year, Mel and I are considering doing quarterly workshops to help parents through this process, especially initially. It is extremely valuable to have what's called a facilitator of these discussions, an impartial third party that knows the system to help guide you through it. So you don't have to worry about procedural stuff. You can just focus on identifying, discussing, solving, and all the other opportunities you have in the meeting. And at our beginning, our first one, we had a facilitator, our buddy Vince, who does this for companies. Hey, let's get this done for our family. He got on the speakerphone and we got through this process.
Can I share what that was like for me?
Yeah.
So this was before we were moving, and I was in a really tough spot. I was excited about moving, but I was struggling with a lot of emotions about moving. I wanted to lose some weight. I was really frustrated. And talking with Joe, just no offense, it just wasn't working. Like we weren't able, the emotions were too high. I really struggled. And
so what Mel needed was to talk about it. What I needed is to not talk about it. So we needed opposite
you wanted
things.
to solve it, I think, more than not talk about it. You wanted to solve it so that we didn't have to talk about it anymore.
Yep.
So you suggested to me, you were like, what if we call Vince? He said he's available. And first I was like mortified. I was like, why would you tell someone? I'm like struggling right now. I feel like I'm not like in a good place physically, in a good place mentally. And after I got over that initial, I guess, embarrassment, we called him, and it was like amazing. Like I did cry. I cried because it was like almost the release. But the fact that you saw that we needed something, and that was a great way for us to get closer and for us to solve some problems with the help of a third party. And Vince is just incredible at asking questions. Super non-judgmental. Like you said, it's an impartial third party. They're not necessarily there. They want you to succeed, but they're not there to give their opinion. They're just there to ask questions to help you shape where you want to go. And that was like the best thing. And I had to get over that friction of being embarrassed or whatever the case may be. But now that I experienced that once, I'm so glad that we did, because I was able to, like we just talked about, I was able to figure out like, hey, here's my 3 goals. Here's what I have to focus on, and stop getting sidetracked by every little thing. And if you hadn't suggested that, and if we didn't have someone like Vince in our lives to provide us that really valuable hour, things might have gone differently.
I think that it is incredibly valuable to have that outside person. It's very tough to do it yourself the first time, especially if there's more emotional baggage or things have been off track for a while. And so while we consider doing this, we'll spin up a wait list here soon. But if you'd like to even get on the pre-wait list, visit us at strongfamilyproject.com or check the description on this YouTube video or podcast. We do have our contact in it. Drop us a message. Say, hey, let me know when that is open. I'd be interested in having you and Mel help us set our 90-day rocks, do our 90-day meeting, clarify our lives, and get things on track for our family. And so it's something we're considering in early next year. So we'll be taking a wait list soon. But if you want to save us the time of spinning up a website, go ahead and drop us a message. And once we get to 10 people on the wait list, we'll close it off, and then we'll open it up when we're ready. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Strong Family Project podcast. Hope you found this one valuable, and look forward to talking to you on the next